time for us to begin. We'll be in Genesis, the second chapter, or Genesis, the 42nd chapter, in just a minute. And we're going to review the whole book. Genesis chapter 42 in just a minute. Jonathan is away at the camp that's going on this week, and so you have the substitute teacher today, and Wednesday. So we'll try to get through chapters 42 and 43 this week, and then he'll be back next week. Talking about the life of Joseph at this point. Before we begin, we'll have a word of prayer as always. There are a number of people, of course, to remember in prayer, certainly those that have the ongoing issues that they are dealing with. We need to continue to remember a lot of people dealing with cancer and other diseases like ALS with Greg, and so please remember all of them. Of course, there's a few people that are going to be having surgeries or have had surgeries we need to continue to remember. Kevin Mullins will have surgery on June 11th on his neck, so please remember him. And then there's a few that are going to have some surgeries in August, a few weeks down the road, so remember Deb and John Cupp and their upcoming surgeries. So, is there anyone like to mention before we go to God in prayer? Oh, she is, okay. Shirley Arney is back in the hospital, so please remember her. Okay, all right. All right, if you would please bow with me, we'll go to God in prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we bow before you to praise your high and holy name. We are so thankful, dear Father, for this opportunity that we have to be together, to study your word. We ask that you be with all of us, dear Father, that we will apply it to our lives, that we will grow closer to you. We thank you, dear Father, for your willingness to send your Son and his willingness to be obedient unto that plan and to die for us, to give us the opportunity to be your children. We're so thankful, dear Father, for the family that we have here, and we ask that you continue to bless the congregation and that you'll be with those that were mentioned that are sick, those that are struggling with various diseases and illnesses. We ask that you would be with their families as they try to take care of them, that you will comfort them. We've recently had people that have lost loved ones, dear Father. We ask that you will give them your comfort and that you'll be with us, that we will look for those opportunities to help them. We're so thankful, dear Father, for all that you do for us, and it's through your Son's name we pray. Amen. All right, so Jonathan likes to do the review piece, so I'm just going to go through this quickly. Jonathan started talking about Joseph a few weeks ago, and then obviously we know the story of Joseph. Joseph is one of those stories we teach kids sometimes, and we kind of forget that there's tremendous application for adults. This is really, really important information to talk about, because I think we see how you can deal with emotions and different kinds of emotions as God's children. I think that's what's so fascinating, at least to me, about this story of Joseph, especially when we get into chapter 42. Obviously, he was the favorite. His brothers were not happy about that. There's some dreams that are going to come up, and they're going to be fulfilled today in chapter 42. The brothers they wanted to kill him, but they ended up selling him. And so he's taken to Egypt. You know the story about in Potiphar's house and Potiphar's wife, and then he's going to be put in prison, and then you're going to have the dreams that Pharaoh's going to have. And as he has those dreams, he's looking for somebody to interpret them. Then all of a sudden it's remembered about this one Joseph. All of a sudden now you have Joseph is made ruler of Egypt. He's only second to Pharaoh. And so you have this amazing story. Obviously went very quickly, but amazing story about the life of Joseph so far. And now all of a sudden you have him where he is in Egypt. He is now known as Zaphenath-Paneah. It's his name. That's important because I think when we get into this story as we go forward, this is what he would have been called. So it's not like his brothers were walking around there like, hey, Joseph, there's people here to see you. There's no reason for them to think that he's alive, first of all. And secondly, they're not going around calling him Joseph in Egypt. So it's understanding the situation that they find themselves in. But he names his two children, Manasseh and Ephraim, Hebrew names. And he says of them at chapter 41, God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. Ephraim means God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. And you think about it from his perspective. He's trying to move on. There's a lot of trials and difficulties he's gone through in his life. And then all of a sudden, his brothers are back. He remembers the dream that he had. We're going to get into in chapter 42. And there's going to be some real-time emotion that we're going to see throughout this chapter. From Jacob, from the brothers, Joseph. It's fascinating to me, anyway, what we see here. I actually think as we go through this chapter, from my view, you're seeing Joseph understanding how God is working in this situation. And he sees his brothers before him. And you just imagine that moment when he understands this is the fulfillment of my dream. They're bowing down to me. And the reaction that he's going to have as we go forward here is just fascinating. So, chapter 42, Joseph's family comes to Egypt for food. There's a huge famine that's going on. And so you imagine in Canaan, as with everywhere else, there's a lot of struggles that are happening. They're running out of food, but they've heard something. Jacob knew that there was food in Egypt. And so he says something to his sons that I find hilarious in verse 1. Why are you staring at one another? Now, when we say that, it's mostly because you know full well what you need to do. This would have been a paralyzing moment for them. There's no food. There's nothing. Why are you looking at one another? That's not going to help the situation. There has to be some action involved. So his dad, Jacob, tells them, you have got to go to Egypt. You have to go to Egypt. And so in verse 1, now Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, and Jacob said to his sons, why are you staring at one another? And he said, behold, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us from that place so that we may live and not die. Then 10 brothers of Joseph went down to buy grain from Egypt, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, I am afraid that harm may befall him. So the sons of Israel came to buy grain among those who were coming, for the famine was in the land of Canaan also. Let me stop there for just a second. Why would he not be willing to send Benjamin? What's the big deal of old Benjamin? John? Yeah. So you have Rachel's other son, the son that she gave birth to and died giving birth to. He would have been Joseph's brother. And so you have a lot of things from Jacob's perspective that was a struggle for him. I think you see how he was dealing with mourning and loss at this point in this situation. Mourning is highly important. It is a part of our lives that we must do, emotions that we must do. But the purpose of mourning is leading to healing. There's a purpose for it. And so you have this situation that he's not willing to send his son. Now, there could be various reasons as to why. He may have viewed the brothers as a little sketchy, and that would have been understandable. At this point, there's a lot of things these brothers have done. If I send him with these boys, there's no telling what's going to happen to them. Obviously, you can be concerned with what's going on in Egypt, and certainly on the road to Egypt, what may happen. But the other piece of this story, we don't know how old he was. We know, at least to some degree, he would have been at least 10 at this point, if not older. Now, if he's a lot older, it certainly plays into Jacob's just scared to death of losing Benjamin, no matter how old he is. But if he's younger, I think many of us can understand. You're not going up the street to get food. You're sending them to Egypt. This is a long trip for them. And so understanding that would play into it as well. Now, having said that, you have to understand in chapter 46, so obviously in the biblical times, this would have been years later, but in our readings, you're just a couple of chapters down the road, all of a sudden now Benjamin has a lot of family that's mentioned of him. So there's time that goes by here, but the reality for us is that we don't know exactly how old he would be, but we certainly know he would have been somewhere, obviously younger than Joseph, but certainly a younger man at this point, if not 10, as some will suggest that he was. So it's an interesting story. Verse 6, now Joseph was the ruler over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. What an amazing moment this had to have been, especially as we go forward in the next couple of verses. This moment is exactly the dream in chapter 37, and the two dreams that Joseph has. That they were going to be bowing down to him. Now, when the brothers hear that the first time, they're like, this is ridiculous. They're angry. They're mad. All the things that happen. It talks about how Joseph takes it and remembers this. He puts it in his heart. So you have all these different reactions to this dream. Joseph seems to be telling the dream just simply because that's what a kid would do. I'm just going to tell you the dream I'm having, and you guys all bow down to me. I could certainly see that as telling my brother that would be a fun thing to do. But you think about it from their perspective. He's having this dream, and now all of a sudden as he's there, they're bowing down before him. Understanding what was happening with this dream had to have been simply amazing. Now, the purpose is why this is amazing are the next verses. And this is where I just want to spend some time. Verses 7 through 9. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he disguised himself to them and spoke to them harshly. And he said to them, "Where have you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." But Joseph had recognized his brothers, although they did not recognize him. Joseph remembered the dream which he had about them, and he said to them, "You are spies. You have come to look at the undefended parts of our land." We'll stop there for a moment. Joseph recognized his brothers. Why did they not recognize him? No, not quite. It's been a while. He was 17 when he left. He's 30 now-ish. So you have time. There's time that goes by. Absolutely. And absolutely. Yeah, so you think about these two things. First of all, they think he's dead. There's no way he's lived this long. They're actually going to tell that to Joseph in a few minutes. I have one brother that's dead. No, you don't. You're talking to him. It's going to be the issue. But you think about that moment. There's no way, even if he's alive, you're not thinking that you're talking in front of him in Egypt as the second in command. We sold him to people that were just, taking wherever they were going to go. Didn't even matter. They just wanted the money, the 20 pieces of silver. Just give us the money. You guys go and do whatever you're going to do. And now he's second in command in Egypt? You would have never thought that. There is no way that would have happened. And so you think about from that perspective, that coupled with they think he's an Egyptian. They assume him to be an Egyptian. That's why I pointed out the name that he has, that they changed his name to in Egypt. So you think about just those two pieces, and they're looking at him, and he's going to treat them as such. In chapter 43, when he's going to eat, at the same time they're eating, he would not eat with them, because the Egyptians found it almost as an insult to eat with the Hebrews, it'll talk about. And so he doesn't act like he knows them, doesn't act like a Hebrew. He acts like an Egyptian, because that's where they are. And that's what he's doing. And so there's a lot of things that have occurred in these 13 years. Obviously, there's a lot of growth in all of them that would have made them look different anyway. But then you couple that with the other things that were happening, it's truly understandable why they didn't recognize him. When you go to a place, I think we've all been in this situation. I went to Arizona and held a gospel meeting a year or two ago. And there was a guy there that I thought I knew. But I was like, why is he in Arizona? He's not in Arizona. Well, he lived in Franklin, or he lived in this area, and he moved there, and I didn't know he had moved there. But I was like, wow, that can't be him. He looks a little like him. Maybe he doesn't look like him. And then you find out, well, that's him. That's the guy. So even in our time, we can understand if you see somebody outside of where you normally are going to see someone, it's a little hard to understand at the moment. But then, obviously, as you go forward, you're able to find that out. But you think about this moment with them, it's just fascinating to me. There was no thought of it being him. Because what was on their minds? Why were they there? They just want the food. They want food. We don't understand starvation here, thankfully. I mean, to truly understand. We'll use the phrase, I'm starving. That means I haven't eaten since breakfast, normally. Right? Oh, I'm starving. Did you hear my stomach growl? That's what we do. Yeah, you must be starving. They had no food. There was no food left anywhere except for in Egypt. And so understanding that motivation, if you're driving down the street and you need gas, where do you see when you're driving? There's a lot of gas stations here. You don't notice the banks. You don't notice anything else. You're looking for gas stations and looking for who's a cent cheaper than the other ones. That's what we're doing. If you're hungry, you see the restaurants. What they were focusing on was the food. I just want the food. This is the guy that can get me food. Let's go bow down before him. But unbeknownst to them, they didn't realize they were fulfilling the dream that Joseph had, that they bowed before their brother. And as they bow down before them, as we're told, Joseph recognizes them and he speaks harshly to them. Verse 9, Joseph remembered the dreams. Why would the Bible tell us that in this moment, in the reaction of what he says? Why does it say that? He remembers the dreams, and what does he do? Oh, Sean.
Well, it's like in our lives, we look back and we see God's providence. It's, God puts us inside. Oh, wait, I see God's hand. In the moment, we may not see it, but being able to look backward.
Okay, all right. You see God's hand at work. What else? Anybody else? Rachel? What do you think about this moment? Your brothers are there. When's the last time you saw them? He's in a pit screaming, and they're eating lunch outside the pit. That's impressive. That's another level of hatred that you're dealing with. They sell him, and he takes away. Joseph has all power that a man can have at this point outside of Pharaoh. And he's going to actually say, if you're spies, by the life of Pharaoh, I will kill you, or I will find you to be truthful. And so you think about that perspective. This is who he is. He has the power to kill the ones who threw him in this pit. There had to have been a moment, just from a human perspective, where you had to think, this is a tremendous temptation for me to kill my brother. And it's just the ones that threw him in the pit. It's not, Jacob's not there. Benjamin's not there. It's just the 10. So you think about this moment, and that's what I think is so fascinating with the reaction. They bowed down to him in verse 9, and he says, you are spies. What do you think the punishment was for spies coming into Egypt? Oh, prison would be nice. No, they would kill you. Yeah, what depends on what you see as bad. It would kill you. If you're spies and you come in and you're found out to be spying on this land, they were going to kill you. So you think about this perspective from an emotional standpoint. His reaction to remembering his dream, recognizing his brothers, was to say, you are spies. Now, here's the interesting part as we go forward of their reaction to this. So they hear this, they're just wanting the food, as it talks about in verse 10. They said, no, my Lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies. Yet he said to them, no, you have come to look at the undefended parts of our land. But they said, your servants are 12 brothers in all, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no longer alive. Oh. Joseph, it is as I said to you, you are spies. But this you will be tested by the life of Pharaoh. You shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you that he may get your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth to you in you. But if not, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. When you think about his reaction to this, simply telling them 3 times, you're nothing but spies. Nothing but spies. What does he do in verse 17? I want you to think about this moment now. Joseph knows who they are. Joseph has all the power. He has all the cards in this moment. He obviously is dealing with a lot of things, a lot of responsibility. But at this moment, he's put his brothers in prison, okay, for 3 days. What do you think it was like for his old brothers at this point? Not only, first and foremost, at this point, you're concerned about your own lives, right? But what happens if they don't go back with the food? The consequences of this were catastrophic at this point. You think about these 3 days and what it had to have been like. It's almost like Joseph sitting in a pit, yelling out. You think about just that moment. For 3 days, they thought that the Egyptians officials thought they were nothing but spies at this point. You're nothing but spies. For 3 days, they're going to deal with this thought. Those 3 days, though, must have meant something to Joseph as well. Why would he do this?
He's dealing with a lot of revenge in his heart. He's fighting it to do what's right.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a lot of emotion going on with Joseph. These 3 days were difficult for the brothers, for sure, but they were difficult for Joseph. And I think the next verse really makes it clear as to why this is something that we see with Joseph and what he was dealing with. This is why I do think when they came and they bowed down before him, he is starting to put everything together now. He's seeing the plan. He's seeing what God is doing while he's here, all the different things. You almost wonder at this point, and certainly we don't know Joseph, I'm just going to put myself in that position, but I would have replayed this moment. If my brothers come here today, this is what I'm going to do to them. That's a Scott issue probably. But that's what I would have done. Don't know what Joseph did or what he was thinking. We do know, though, he's going to end up at the correct response. He's going to understand that God was involved with this. You meant this for evil, but God used it for good as we go on through. Not to ruin the book of Genesis for you, but that's what's going to happen. So you think about, as he talks to his brothers, he tells them in verse 18, "Now Joseph said to them on the 3rd day, 'Do this and live, for I fear God.'" Now, if I was one of the brothers, as soon as he said, "and live," that's all I wanted to hear at this point. You do something and live. Perfect. You tell me what we need to do, that's what we're going to do. But we see the side of Joseph. I fear God. Why would that be such a big deal for the Hebrews to hear, do you think? This is Elohim. This is the name that they would use, Hebrews would use. What does this mean to them? Or what do you think they thought at this point? He's different.
It's not like the Egyptian.
Mm-hmm. It's not by I fear Pharaoh. Pharaoh would have been certainly viewed to be God, a god at this point. So you think about what he's saying, I fear God. Now they could have certainly come to the conclusion he's talking about one of their gods, whatever god he's talking about. He speaks Egyptian. We're going to find out in a few minutes. And so you think about all the different things that are happening at this moment, but what he is saying, I believe, is I do fear God. I do see what God has done. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to do something. And they're going to be willing, or at least that's the thought anyway, that they were going to be willing to do something that was going to cause them to live. Now the problem with what they're willing to do, this is the issue that comes up now. Okay? Why, or what does Joseph tell them that they need to do? Out of anything, you name it, Joseph, we'll do anything. What does he ask them to do, or tell them?
Take grain back to starting household.
Okay, take the food back. One of the brothers is going to stay. The 9 others had no issue with that.
Bring the youngest brother.
Bring the youngest. There's your problem. So you have, take food back. No problem. We can definitely do that. Leave one of you. Simeon. Staying. Now, we may not get into it today. We're not told how long Simeon's there. I mean, he's going to stay for a while. You know, it takes a little time for Jacob to get to the right conclusion of sending him back. So it's interesting, the perspective of old Simeon here in this story. But he's going to stay in Egypt, but bring the brother back. Now, verse 19, as he goes on here, and this is still Joseph that is going to be talking. "If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined in your prison, But as for the rest of you, go carry grain for a famine of your households, and bring your youngest brother to me, so your words may be verified, and you will not die." And they did so. So if you were wondering what was going to happen to them, or what they thought was going to happen to them, make no mistake about it. When they're sitting in prison for 3 days, they're going to die. That's absolutely what was going to happen. You're spies. I'm second in command. You're going to die. What changed? Joseph. Didn't matter what the brothers did in those 3 days necessarily. This is about Joseph. Joseph now all of a sudden is talking about God. He's talking about, I fear God, you do this and live. Now he wants to see his brother, obviously, as the story goes on. But verse 21, so they did so. Yes, well, we're happy to do that. But I want you to notice what guilt does to people. Then they said to one another, "Truly we are guilty concerning our brother, because we saw the distress of his soul when he pleaded with us. Yet we would not listen. Therefore this distress has come upon us." Reuben answered them, saying, "Did I not tell you, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen to me. You would not listen. Now comes the reckoning for his blood." Now, first of all, they're 100% correct on this. This is exactly the situation that they put themselves in with Joseph. They let him go, but they're still not obviously connecting that it's Joseph that they're talking to. This is what guilt looks like when you carry guilt. There was no reason for any people still today do the exact same thing. You're carrying a burden that you can't carry. And so when Jacob dies at this, does anybody remember what the reaction or know what the reaction of the brothers was? It's going to cause Joseph to weep. He didn't kill us before, but now that Dad's dead, he's going to kill us. No, he's not. You have the same thing here. We are guilty. We're being punished. His blood will be on us. It's the reckoning that is happening. You think about all the different phrases that are used here and how they handle this guilt and how they're dealing with this guilt of what they have done. It is a fascinating part of this story to me, to see how people handle these various different emotions that are happening at this moment. They even know before they get back what Dad's going to say. There's no way he's going to allow this to happen. Verse 23, this goes up into what we talked about earlier from Egypt perspective. They're talking in Hebrew, and what do they not expect to have happen here? Joseph's not going to understand. He's an Egyptian. The translator's right there. If he's going to translate, we would hear it. So they're not listening. The problem was Joseph spoke Hebrew pretty well. And so he understood exactly what they were saying. His reaction, I think, is powerful as well. In verse 24, what does he do? He turns and weeps. Why would he weep? Why weep? Yeah. Think about this moment. You have your brothers here. They certainly did something horrible. This is where you actually learn in verse 21 about Joseph's actions in the pit. This is not really talked about earlier on in Genesis. But what was he doing while he was in the pit? He was distressed. He was crying out. I mean, you think about the way this is described. Because we saw the distress of his soul when he pleaded with us. That's exactly what they're going through now at the hands of the power that Joseph has. It's fascinating, the comparisons that occur in this story. But you think about that moment, his response to that, all of this is going on. They're still thinking about what they did to me. They're still thinking about it. They understand that there's going to be this guilt that they're dealing with, this reckoning that they are dealing with. They have no idea, again, Joseph's standing there. But that's what's on their minds. And Joseph hears it, he turns away, and he weeps. But when he returned to them and spoke to them, he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. Again, you understand Joseph's power that he has in these situations. He takes Simeon He binds them right before them, and he tells them to go. Now, the interesting thing in verse 25, what does Joseph tell or give the orders to do? Fill the bags with grain. They're going to go taken back on their journeys. Verse 26, they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed from there. Everything's going pretty well at this point. Then you come to the next emotional piece of this story. Verse 27, as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his money, and behold, it was in the mouth of his sack. Then he said to his brothers, my money has been returned, and behold, it is even in my sack. And their hearts sank. And they turned trembling to one another, saying, what is this that God has done to us? You think about those two phrases up there. Their hearts sank. That moment. Why was that such a big deal? You're spies. You're not honest people. What's the big deal about finding this money? Where should the money be? In Egypt. You're not supposed to have this money. It's supposed to be in Egypt. Their heart sinks. What are we going to do now? Of course they're going to think we're thieves. We have the money. Of course they think we're lying. We have the money. Why is God doing this to us? Why is God doing this to us? It's a perspective that people have, still have. You go through all these situations and we tend to blame God for things. When the reality is, who's the one that put the money in their sacks? Joseph does. But they blame God. Why? Why is this happening to us? Why are these things occurring? Well, because your brother is second in command and you don't understand what's happening at this moment. But you see God working throughout this whole story, obviously. And you see what is happening throughout the whole thing, to the point now that you come back to Jacob. Jacob is told what has happened. And Jacob's response, again, is fascinating to me. So verse 29, they go back to the land of Canaan. Verse 30, the man, the Lord of the land, spoke harshly with us and took us for spies of the country. But we said to him, we are honest men, we are not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no longer alive, and the youngest is with our father today in the land of Canaan. The man, the Lord of the land, said to us, by this I will know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me, and take grain for the famine of your households, and go. But bring your youngest brother to me, that I may know that you are not spies, but honest men. I will give your brother to you, and you may trade in the land. So far, so good. 35. Now it came about, as they were emptying their sacks, that behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were dismayed. It was one thing if it was one of them. All 9 of them have the money. And even Jacob is standing there. And they are so dismayed. Why would they be so dismayed? They're in Canaan now. They have food. Why would they be so dismayed, do you think?
Evidence that they stole.
Yeah. Absolutely evidence. Simeon's in trouble. If you don't go back, it's certainly going to happen. Egypt's the power of the time, so that's an issue, obviously. You think about all the things, and ultimately we know that they're going to have to go back to get more food. And so there's a lot of things that are happening in this situation, but they are just dismayed. Those are words, that we can use to describe that, but have you ever been dismayed? It's not just like a little sad. Or we talk about your heart sank. This is a horrible situation that they find themselves in. And again, I think it's important for us to put ourselves in this position because we've all potentially have been in these situations where your heart sank. You get a phone call that you're not expecting. There's a lot of things that can happen in this life. We can all deal with those things. We've all dealt with those things. And it's not new. Man has always dealt with those types of things. And so you have these moments here that there is absolutely dismay. Verse 36, though, Jacob's reaction You have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. And you want to take Benjamin? All these things are against me. Now, some of your versions in verse 36 will say, everything happens to me, is what Jacob said. Everything happens to me. That's a hilarious way of wording that. Verse 36, you see how Jacob was dealing with some of the issues. He brings up Joseph. He still very well remembers, obviously, what happened with Joseph and the brothers. He doesn't know the whole story. He doesn't know what happens, but he blames them because he didn't come back alive. Something happened at their watch. Now you have Simeon. He's already written him off. He's no more. He's gone. And now you want to take Benjamin? You want to take Benjamin? Why do these bad things happen to me? Jacob said. One of the fascinating things about Jacob is that there are people throughout scriptures and other parts of the book that will talk about how blessed Jacob was. He's one of the names mentioned when we talk about the blessings of Jacob. Jacob was a very blessed man. He also went through horrible things in life. That's very similar to what we can deal with. And it's okay if the reaction to some degree is this, that you're just devastated at this moment. But it's certainly learning, obviously, to go through those things, to go through those emotions that you deal with. We'll always talk about mourning as an example. The Bible says we are to mourn, but we don't mourn as those who have no hope. You still mourn. You still are going to go through the emotions. That's okay. But it's understanding how you deal with those things. And Jacob here obviously understands the sadness of the situation, of the potential situation anyway. Reuben comes to call in verse 37. Then Reuben spoke to his father, saying, You may put my 2 sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my care, and I will return him to you. Jacob, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left. If harm should befall him on the journey you are taking, then you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow. So he didn't put too much stock in Reuben's words, evidently. But what else do you learn in verse 38? How does Jacob view his boys? They're not the same. They still have the favoritism that's going on. It's still an issue that he's dealt with. It just went from Joseph now to Benjamin. You would think in some weird way that he would have blamed Benjamin for killing Rachel in some crazy thought. There's a lot of things that can happen in these moments. But you think about verse 38. Reuben says in 37, you can kill my 2 children if I don't bring them back. Nah, I don't even want to send Benjamin. Your 2 children aren't worth me sending Benjamin. I can't trust you with that. Now, there seems to be some differences as we go into chapter 43 about how when Judah will say something compared to Reuben. So you definitely have some differences of the relationships, even though Reuben is the oldest. And so there's some differences that have happened. I'm sure you guys studied some of it earlier on that Reuben does. But there's some trust issues, obviously, throughout this family. So you think about this family, and it's a huge family, but they had a lot of issues. There's a lot of things that they were dealing with or not dealing with that were just existing in this house that they were going through at this moment. So we end chapter 42 simply with this idea, I am not willing to send my son. If you don't send your son, Jacob, what are they not going to get? Not Simeon, and what else? Food. Food. If you don't send your son, I am not willing to send my son. And the consequence would be we don't have any food left. His reaction is fascinating from that standpoint, and it doesn't stop here. Chapter 43, we'll get into on Wednesday night. We'll talk about the same thing as he starts in verse 1. Now the famine was severe in the land. It's not all of a sudden it started raining, or not all of a sudden it changed. This is going to be a continual thing that they're going to be dealing with. And as we get into Wednesday, we'll talk about what happens when Joseph sees his brother, Benjamin. So thank you all very much.